Hey, good morning. My name is Iker Bucio. I'm going to explain the experiment of Jane Elliott with name a class divide that was in 1968. I record myself in the left part, and I have a presentation and I'm going to explain that. Okay, first, the main point of this is who is Jane Elliott? Well, Jane Elliott is this wonderful person that you can see in the slides. Jane Elliott was an American-born educator and anti-racism activist. Already mentioned before, she was an activist against racism, and for those same reasons, she was the creator who did the blue eyes and brown eyes exercise that are the class divide experiment. In her third grade classroom in Iowa in 1968, which was an experiment at racism and involved a process of psychological background. And the experiment was carried out by her after the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. in 1968, in the same year that when she created this experiment, influencing the educator Jane Elliott to create the famous blue eyes and brown eye exercise. Well, now I'm going to talk about from who was Martin Luther King Jr. and what happened with him. Now we will talk about the inspiration that Jane had from this experiment. That was the assassination of this person that was Martin Luther King Jr. Well, Martin Luther King was a person in charge of undertaking a peaceful struggle to achieve equal civil rights from African Americans. His great oratorical ability made him one of the most influential media figures of that time. For more than 10 years, he had great achievements in the fight for civil rights through non-violent stances and peaceful demonstrations. In late March 1968, King headed to Memphis, to Tennessee, to support African American workers to try to achieve more rights from day. On April 3rd, King returned to Memphis, but his plane was delayed by a bomb threat against him, since at that time the racism was extremely common and supported in the society, and it looks bad to defend racism after knowing about the threat against him. Martin King addressed, when he knew about that, Martin King addressed a group of people, giving his last speech that he never knew that that was his last speech. But the title of this speech was Reese, I've been to the mountaintop, referring to the fact that his intention were sincere and that his life was not significant because of how long he lived, rather because of what he will do in his lifetime. And this is why he will decide to not stop fighting from his people. His people is referring to the African Americans. He never going to stop trying to fight against them to have their rights. A day before, Martin Luther King was shot in the head by a sniper when he was interacting with his supporters from the balcony of the Lauren Motel, causing his death, obviously. The attack has a very strong impact on the nation, and is the beginning of serious disorders and fires that spread to other states, making this a world new. Carrying out the awareness of what generates racism, and to a certain point, his death favored the fight against the racism and caused people like Jane Elliott to put a little of this intellect developing exercise that will be recognized worldwide and generate a change in society, at the same time making them aware of the importance. The person who was responsible from King's death was James Early Ray. Mm, and that's all about the history of who was Martin Luther King Jr. and what he what he did the in his life, and the impact that caused in the society and in the world. And nowadays it continue making an important part of the fight through the racism. Well, now focusing in the experiment of the class divide experiment, the teacher Jane Elliott decided to carry out a pedagogical exercise with her students to teach them in an implicit way the meaning of the discrimination and the consequence that racism generates in the person who receive it and in the person who give it. This exercise is called social categorization, which consists of the division of the society by means of its physical or economic characteristics. In this case, it consists on the division of the students with brown eyes and blue eyes that are a physical characteristic. It consists that in the first day of the experiment, uh, consists of giving benefits to the blue-eyed boys and girls, such as giving them more recess time, extra points, leaving class early, and giving them prizes such as food, like chips or something like that. And those with brown eyes were deprived of benefits such as not being able to go to recess, or gave them more homework and things like that. The brown eyes childrens were given a handkerchief so they could be quickly identified. The teacher, apart from giving benefits to the blue eyes children, also subliminally caused fights between them, like when someone with brown eyes answer grown to a question, the professor exhibit him, or things like that, to make that the blue eyes group feel superior than the brown eye group, generating fights between them. It doesn't matter if they have a lifelong friend. They makes barriers where it generates the superiority to others and dividing the friendship by a physical trait. The next day, the teacher reversed the roles. That's the second day. The second day, the professor reversed the roles, and now those with brown eyes were the superior now. And something that was different is that the development of the children with brown eyes was superior. For example, when they deliver jobs much faster than the blue eyes in the day after, and being much more ethical than those of blue eyes a day before. On the third day, the teacher explained that it was a social experiment so that they will find out how much racism is in their country, and that They do not like being discriminated against because of the color of their eyes. It's the same with the color of their skin. The teacher got them to put themselves in a place where they will empathize with people of color. In 1983, they meet the professor, and the professor and the students met and watch the video of when they were children of this experiment. The intention of this was to see how much it influenced them in their lives. The teacher was surprised by how much it impacts in their lives. The feeling of humiliation, superiority, inequity, and equity made them value the people who surrounded them, and they value themselves. She also helped them to be able to educate their families and their friends, and thus they generate a change of solidarity that expands, generating equality in in the society. The professor was really satisfied with the impact that this experiment makes in their life. Um, Jane Elliott's movie was so famous that she spread throughout the world, so much that that she came to operate as far as the high security correctional facility in Stoneville in New York, generating an equal impact and so on in many more institutions, in universities, and a lot of institutions. This type of experiment help us to know how and why discrimination occurs and intolerance between social groups is justified. Keep in mind that this is a very controversial experiment, and it can be dangerous to carry it out if you do not have the necessary knowledge to do it. Although it is not necessary to experiment with a group, since to the date this type of discrimination is seen every day, from discrimination in clothing, in economic level, and many more. The truth is that I feel that this experiment covers many fields of psychology, not only the scholar psychology that we saw in the class. I feel this covers all fields in psychology, since the discrimination is reflected literally in any field, and this causes very large psychological problems such as depression, eating change. For example, when saying the name of someone who is overweight, and may start with bulimia or things related to eating disorders. It may even happen by treating something different from other. In my daily life, what I have seen reflected the most in discrimination is in the sport, because I dedicate to the sport and the school. But I see reflected in the sports when the coaches, for example, treat different the first team to the second team. They generate many barriers of our relationship in the team, and even the first team coaches make them feel the second team. The coaches make them feel less to the first team, and that in some people cause depression. And in conclusion, this experiment is highly recommended. I feel it, since you generate a balance and empathy in any type of scenarios where there are difference between one or another. Also, with the way society is, the risk it can cause is very high, since the violence is very common and easy to provoke. And that's all for this explanation. Thanks for your attention and nice day.